All right, this episode is called Prioritizing Poison, and it highlights the extent, the effort people go through to use poison on the ground, to use poison on plants. And I understand that you're more comfortable with the word herbicide. It causes death, and it is really ugly. It shrivels life up. It can't be good. Just stop lying to yourselves. Just because somebody put a new label on it does not make it good, but that's a different topic. One of the things I've observed is that this isn't based on an actual need at a specific time. It's based on the calendar date. And that goes for the landscapers in this local HOA. It goes for the contractors of the city on the adjacent streets. It goes for the contractors going to the parks all over the city. All at the exact same time. Every single one of these contracted companies went out and sprayed poison. Okay, you've got various species of thistles that have been growing all year. Like they reach towering heights. You have grasses. You have random weeds. You have all of these at different sizes and different stages in life. But on one special calendar day, that's the day to go out and, quote, treat those plants with herbicide. That's not responding to a need. That's not on hand landscaping. You know, when the weeds are bigger than the decorative plants, and everybody's okay with that, as long as at some point in the year they get sprayed with poison, you're not thinking this through. Yeah, because the landscapers are there every single week of the year. You know, it's not like they come through twice a year or 3 times a year and therefore they can't get to it. You have 3, 4, 5 employees there weekly. It wouldn't be that hard to just pull the weeds by hand as they appear, which, by the way, would be much more attractive and much more effective. Because what do you got now? Especially with the big plants that got sprayed with poison. You have great big disintegrating weeds. You know, they look like they're melting, and they're ugly, and they're still there. Most of the excuses for the landscaping are to provide a pleasing visual for the people living there. How does leaving a dead or dying plant in the same spot that it was previously while it was alive make things better? It's uglier and the plant is still there. Astonishingly, they still weed whacked. They still weed whacked in the same places that they sprayed the poison. They even weed whacked some of the poisoned plants. Not all of them. Some of these plants are partially weed whacked while partially disintegrating. Some of them are just weed whacked. Some of them are just poisoned. Some of them were missed entirely. The main point there is how many different resources are being spent. You know, it's not like you were more efficient because you sprayed poison and that solves the weed problem forever. Nope. In fact, you spent money on contractors the very next time out, the very next week, out there with the weed whackers. And guess what? Every single one of those weeds is coming back as we speak and will be there until the next time that the calendar day tells all of these poorly programmed robots to go out and spray poison again. Let's also consider the end goal of the poison. You're just going to have to get used to me calling it poison. I'm not going to cater to the marketing name that makes everyone feel better about spraying poison all over your neighborhoods, which is really the point. There is vegetation withering up and dying right next to playgrounds, right next to dog parks, along the sidewalks, everywhere that your pet would want to sniff or explore and walk. Even if you're one of those mean people that doesn't allow a canine to do what it's meant to do, use his or her olfactory senses, and you just like choke hold your dog during the entire walk, well, their paws are still picking up that poison, and many dogs will have an allergic reaction to that and end up licking those paws with the poison on them, as are the shoes of your children. And what if one of your toddlers falls over? Maybe you weren't allowing the toddler to play in the poison, but what if your toddler falls into where the poison was sprayed? Are you so confident still? Are you so confident that there's nothing wrong with that stuff that caused a living creature to turn orange and shrivel up? But I digress. Excuse me, that's not where I was going with that. I was going with what was the goal in the first place? Why do those plants need to be poisoned? Well, you could just say it's a weed. We don't want weeds here. But look at the goal. Look at the landscaping goal. In most of these examples that I'm filming, the goal is to have nothingness, just bare, dead soil. It's not attractive. We've decided that we need these borders. And every year it seems like they decide that these borders need to be bigger. You need to have a gap of death between the sidewalk and the street, a gap of death between the sidewalk and the park grass. The parks are shrinking because the death border is moving in. How about the death borders surrounding trees? The circumference, the diameter of all of this yellow grass, just unnaturally yellow grass. This was green grass last week, and it is now bright yellow. And this is within parks where kids play. In fact, there were kids playing soccer there while I was filming all of this neon yellow grass. Why? Because you have to have a death border around the base of a tree. Why? And then there's the death boundaries in between the intentionally planted decorative plants, which 8, maybe even 9 times out of 10 are unattractive themselves. So you've got unattractive plants with a landscaping priority to make sure nothing is alive in between those plants. So much so that if some grass or another plant tries to grow in this beautiful deathscape, more poison is applied. There's also the scenario that isn't the completely barren deathscape. There's the wood chip deathscape. And a lot of the times it's just a couple of pieces of the wood chips remaining mixed into the deathscape. So it's ugly, it's hideous, it looks accidental, but it's still what the humans decided should be there. So the effort is to maintain this ugly, decaying wood chip deathscape, so much so that, once again, any weeds coming up through those wood chips are sprayed with poison. You are spraying poison to maintain something ugly. Like, I could argue that the plants, the weeds, the grasses, the thistles are more attractive than the actual landscaping that all this effort is being put into. That's how ugly this landscaping is. I started this by talking about prioritization, and I want to end by talking about the park where there's the death border between stones and the grass. And, it's clear that this poison has been applied for a long time because it's mostly death. It's mostly turned into something where nothing can grow. And yet you have a couple of those persistent weeds that came up and they had to reapply poison. Now, I pan up from the plants, the grass. It's not even weeds. They just can't have the grass, the very grass that they planted at the park. You just can't have any of that in your precious death zone. So that's been sprayed. But I pan up, and the branches of the trees that were chopped off of the trees by the same landscaping company 2 years ago are still laying on the ground up against the wooden fence of the homes there. You're prioritizing spraying poison on grass to maintain a death zone between the rocks and the rest of the grass, while leaving behind the branches that same company chopped down 2 years ago and didn't bother to pick up. And it's amazing to me that with all this talk about fire fuel and fear of wildfires, etc., that no other citizen notices that. People talk a big talk about the fire fear on social media. How are you not noticing that the people you're paying to maintain parks and neighborhoods are leaving fire fuel stacked up against your home's fences? And they're there every week. Again, this isn't a once a year oversight. They are there every week of the year. Can you imagine how much money that comes out to? Every park, every week of the year. And yet they can't haul away the fire fuel. But they can spray poison on grass to maintain a border that no one understands. I certainly don't understand it. And last, let's talk about the efficiency. Because bringing out the poison can, walking around spraying the poison on the plants, the money that the poison costs, all of that can be eliminated by someone being willing to bend down and pull the plant. These plants are easy to uproot. They're very easy to uproot. I do it all the time just to demonstrate how easy it is. Not only does that eliminate the need to use the poison, it also eliminates the need to use the weed whackers later, because you actually got the problem at the root. It's amazingly more efficient. And it leads me to wondering if, in fact, they're intentionally inefficient, because they wouldn't have excuses to come back. They're already running out of excuses. You know, there's not a single leaf on a tree. There's nothing on the ground. Their own plants are dead and ugly. The only thing that the landscapers could really do when they come through is pick up the trash that the people living in the neighborhood leave on the ground, and they're not going to do that. No. They have a very specific war waged on life. Organic material. Trash? No, that stays. But if you ever adopted an effective strategy against this vegetation that you've waged war on, oops, you might be out of a job. Or at least out of some of your hours. Well, let's keep doing things inefficiently, stupidly, expensively, and why not keep adding poison to the ground while doing it?